Hello, and welcome back to A Better World. This is your host, Mitchell J. Rabin, and I'm very glad you're joining us again today. Today, we're going to have another very interesting show. I have invited Judy Schwartz to join us, who is a well-known author, journalist. She's co-hosted. She has co-written and co-ghosted a number of different articles and books on many different subjects from the environment on water, which is her specialty, and with doctors and therapists talking about things that are, well, very important to us all. So we're very pleased to have Judy on with us today. And I'll just say another word or two about her books. One is called Cows Save the Planet. What a great name. Water in Plain Sight. And well, there are several others as well. You can look around and find them on Amazon and elsewhere. Judy went to Northwestern University, Brown University, Columbia Graduate School of Journalism, and it's really a pleasure to have her on with us today. So, Judy, hello, and welcome
Hello.
to A Better World.
Well, thank you. A better world sounds like a good place to be.
It is, indeed, it is. So, looking at one of your several books, Water in Plain Sight, I've just been really enjoying it. And one of the things that a nice phrase you came up with is that water isn't a noun, but water is a verb. It's a really interesting way of thinking about not just watering the plants, but kind of water as an active movement across our planet. I was thinking about it. Of course, our bodies are 80% or so water, and our planet is about actually more like 97% water, 95, something like that, some high level. So tell us, what do you mean by that phrase? What do you think we ought to really take to ourselves about what you mean with that phrase?
Yeah. So when I was writing this book, um, I got right. I started to see water as a verb, that I became I felt that understanding how water works, how it moves across the landscape and through the atmosphere,
Yeah.
kind of really helps us engage with our many in ecological and social challenges. That if we, so, all right, so I'll tell you how I came to this book. So I had just written a book about soil. That's what the kind of absurdly named Cows
About the
Save the
cows?
Planet.
Yeah.
Right, right. That was actually a book about soil.
Yeah.
Um, but back then, more than
Could
10
have called
years.
it cow pies for all.
Yeah, 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 yeah. Um, so yeah, so I just written a book about soil, and it started to occur to me that the way that people talk about water just isn't moving us in a way that we can actually engage with restoring the water cycle and helping us address water needs. So, like when there was a California drought, which I know there's always a California drought, unless there are
Flood.
floods in California and mudslides. But when people would talk about the drought as though it's only a matter of how much our water problems are only a matter of how much or how little falls from the sky. When I knew that how we treat the land has everything to do with our water situation. And that wasn't even talked about. So that was one of the things that compelled me to write the book. I remember that there was a an article that was going around that said that for California to get past the drought, there needed to be something like 11 billion um,
Gallons.
Olympic-sized swimming pools
Oh,
worth of rain
oh,
to stop the drought. And then I laughed because you can have, like, as many billions of of swimming pools worth of water fall. And if the ground can't soak in
Absorb it.
exactly, then you're like back in drought again. It would be all that wasted swimming pools worth of water. So
Absolutely.
yeah,
That is
and then just
because you're talking about runoff. That if the soil is so dry and it can't absorb the water, it goes away. It
right.
runs off back into the ocean from whence it came, you know, and then you have the same problem over and over again. That's what I hear
Hmm.
you saying.
Yes, yes. I remember someone that I talked to saying that there are many places where no matter how much rain you get, you will immediately be back in drought mode very
So,
quickly. Right.
what's the solution? One is the thinking about water and its soil permeability. So, it's funny, you're making an interesting point here by implication that if you want to talk about water, you have to talk about soil, really. And if you want to talk about healthy soil, you're really having to talk about water.
Yeah, it's true. Um, yeah, that healthy soil that has good aggregation, which is a big word meaning
Yeah.
basically airspace and structure so that air and water can flow easily, meander,
Yeah.
not move too fast, that holds so much more water. I think um, something like one for every 1 gram of um, carbon added to the soil means that like can hold 8 grams of water. So it has everything. When we say
Yeah.
healthy soil, we mean carbon rich soil.
Yeah. 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 That's very interesting. Well, we live in a carbon world. This is a carbon based, we are carbon based entities, carbon based humanoids. And
Yeah, it's interesting you say that. I've got right down here on by my desk a book by Paul Hawken
walking,
called
carbon.
Carbon, the Book of Life, where he almost goes so far as to see carbon as he, well, basically talks about carbon as a verb, that carbon is not a thing as much as a flow. And certainly
Interesting.
water is always on the move. You don't want water to be static. It's always moving and it's always refreshing itself and it's engaging with the rest of life.
Indeed. Yeah. Oh, I like the way you put that. Always refreshing itself. That's refreshing.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, but it's true. And I mean, look, if we really want to step back at the end of the day, even understanding ecology and biology, we have to understand physics. So, and when we understand physics, we understand, actually, not to get too esoteric, but everything is energy. And if everything is energy, it's a bunch of atoms swimming together. And it's actually even more, it's wavicles, it's waves, i.e., frequencies that are playing and entangling with each other. That's what quantum physics teaches us. Even classical physics does to some extent, right? So that is the game. And you're putting your finger on it very much by looking at water, which is one of the world's, which is life's greatest manifestation of that dance. I was actually wanting to ask you a question. I was thinking, in preparation for our interview today, Judy, that even though we have a lot of scientific data about the nature of water these days, that does not disqualify it from being a magical experience, because there's nothing quite like it, in all of its different phases, from solid to water to vapor. I mean, there's really nothing else that acts like it, and which just goes to uh, reinforce your good thought about it being a verb, which I really like. And I really would like people digest and ingest that, imbibe it, I should say. Sorry. And
Mhm.
because it really activates it in a way that is useful. There are meditations actually that have to do with looking at our body as a body of water and moving. And that helps, you talked about static before. It helps stasis be removed by simply even the thought, as I said, I don't want to get too esoteric, but just the thought of movement of water in the body causes some movement. We actually know this scientifically. Anyway, just wanted to bring this up, and maybe you could comment, if you would, on this magic quality. I mean, you've been really studying water closely and the way it operates in our environment and the way it creates a healthier planet, the way it deals with the global warming, global heating crisis.
Yeah, another thing that compelled me to write this book is that when water and climate are considered together, it only went in one direction, that climate change will have an impact on sources of water throughout the world. Okay, now that's very real. However, what hasn't been really looked at, although it is beginning to be, at least in my circles,
Mm-hmm.
um, that the impact that water has on climate. And this was extremely exciting to me
Yeah.
because most of our climate is determined by water, and how we have opportunities to work with the water cycle, most basically by um, improving the soil, enhancing vegetation, just by healing our landscapes.
Hydration,
Yeah,
if you will.
yeah, yeah. And so I thought it was really important that, we look at desiccated, you say hydration, many landscapes are unfortunately dehydrated, that you may look at a picture of a, desiccated landscape, it looks terrible, and think this is the result of climate change. But actually, it is a cause of climate change, because that is where the water cycle no longer functions. And so you get heat that isn't dissipated by the act of transpiration, which is what plants are doing
Right.
all the
The
time.
hydrologic cycle.
Yeah, yeah. So when I say, water is a verb, I think of three processes. One is infiltration, which is
Mhm.
the capacity for water for land to hold on to water.
Right.
For That's the kind of slow meandering as water filters through a landscape, nourishing all the life in the soil and all the plants and all of
Mhm.
that. So that's,
Microbes.
yep, yep. So that's infiltration. But then there's transpiration, which is the upward movement of water through plants.
Yes.
That happens all the time. Like every green leaf has the stomata, the little pores
Hmm.
that are active in photosynthesis, but also where the moisture is released. And what's really important to know about that is a cooling mechanism.
Yeah.
So all the plants are busy all around us, cooling the surface of the earth, taking heat energy and transforming it. So that's
Such a
really,
point.
yes.
Robin Williams didn't call it global warming. He called it global grilling.
Ah,
That's really what's going on.
yeah, yeah. Yeah, so there's a wonderful quote by an Australian, um, kind of interesting character, horse breeder, someone who really a student of the Australian landscape. Peter Andrews, and he says in one of his books, plants manage water, and in managing water, they are managing heat. So, ah,
Yes.
again, so plants are not passive and static. They're working and they're managing, they're working with water. They're kind of, you know, pumping water and doing all this, and that is managing heat. So
That's
water
fantastic.
and climate are really entwined.
Inseparable. So, I love that reframing. And this, just like water as a verb and plants manage water, these ideas bring another purview in and gets our brain excited about understanding water in a much larger way that I feel we owe both to the planet and to ourselves in being we are caretakers and stewards of the planet, and that means largely of water.
Mhm.
So I totally appreciate it. I was thinking, you're a writer and you're a creative writer and all of that, and you're inspiring me because as you were describing transpiration, I was thinking that water is pushing up. Of course, trees do this with sap also, and maybe even maple syrup. Push up against the force, the powerful force of gravity. That's how powerful water in movement, water as a verb is.
Mhm.
That it actually, I mean, it does things that we can't do, you
Right.
know?
Yeah,
Anyway, any
that's
comments? You thought
that's
about that, I'm
true.
sure.
Yeah. I guess I just accepted that that's what water does. And then of course the flip side is
Yeah.
it that water condenses. So and it forms clouds and the heat that had been embodied in the released water vapor, it is then released. But that happens high up in the atmosphere. So water is through all its processes is cooling.
I'd like to just give a shout out to John Scholl and Eco Restoration Alliance because it's through that organization that you and I originally met, if you recall. And I did an interview with John on nature's cooling system,
Mhm.
which is in part what you're saying right now. It's a
Oh,
whole cooling system.
absolutely. And then you can take a broader look at healthy ecosystems, and that's how climate is managed. And we know that we can restore even large scale damaged ecosystems. And so, therefore, we can restore that capacity. But if we think about carbon as in a static way, if we think about water as a static thing, we are we are less able to see the possibilities.
You know, when you mention Paul Hawken, who's also been a guest on our show, uh, and his latest book, Carbon, while I've only read the beginning of it, um, I have a sense that one of the points he makes, and maybe you can help me with this, is that carbon has been given a bad name as such, which is almost akin to saying that we're giving life a bad name. That's how important carbon is. But because of the commercialization of something I'm involved in, which is the green movement, including in the social impact business world, carbon has been demonized. And there is such hoopla about, about it when there is a problem. The problem may be best understood as the excess carbon, not carbon, but the
Mhm.
excess
Mhm.
carbon that has gotten, according to the usual greenhouse gas theory. And I will say that because I've heard friends who are scientists question that. So I'm not going to go there right now, but
Hmm.
I am going to say that the issue isn't carbon itself. That is, as I said, like questioning life itself, but
Hmm.
rather the excess of anything in our world, in nature, anything in excess causes a problem, whether it's vitamin D in our body, you know, there's an excess. Carbon
Right.
in the atmosphere,
So it's
exactly.
out of balance.
It's out of balance.
And
Or a deficiency in Chinese medicine, which I have a background in. We always talk about excess and deficiency. And that is, the yin and the yang of our bodies and of our mother nature. Yeah,
yeah,
your comments.
yeah, and specifically about carbon, it's that there's not enough in the ground and there's too much in the atmosphere. So
Exactly.
yeah, that was kind of my way into all of this, was realizing that so much of the excess carbon in the atmosphere, I thought it was all about fossil fuels, but how much came from the soil? And I had never thought about soil. I like had been a city person and grew up in the suburbs, and what
Yeah.
did I know? And so I started looking into soil and saying, well, if carbon came from the soil, can carbon be brought back into the soil? And back then, the only people talking about this were people in the holistic planned grazing community. And
Yeah.
that's where the name Cows Save the Planet comes from, because managing livestock in a way that mimics the behavior of animals and animal impact on soil, that brings carbon into the soil. So
You
that
talk
was,
about that, if you would, a little bit more, expand on that. So we understand the cyclical nature of the cow's biology, etc., eating, excreting, soil, water.
yeah.
It
So it
sounds
works
like what's
on
that book? Eat, pray, eat, love, pray.
right, right, right. Yeah.
Right. Eat, excrete, soil, water.
Right. Actually, there is a book by that name. I'm forgetting what it's called. Joe Roman is the author, and it was a lot about the whale poop cycle.
Oh,
Whale pump.
interesting.
Moving carbon down lower, and you know.
Yeah,
Anyway,
yeah,
so
yeah,
um,
yeah.
so
Same
there's,
idea,
but
but one's on land, one's on sea.
right, right, yeah. So cows, it works in many levels. It is, that they excrete, and that becomes fertilizer, that cycle. And then they're trampling when they move en masse,
Right.
as in when a predator is in the vicinity, that they trample all um, the decaying, all of the plant matter so that it can be incorporated into the soil.
Hmm.
That's another thing and another aspect. And then also their movements of their hoofs create little craters where water can begin to pool. So it stays on the landscape longer. There are
That,
many.
in other words, that's the countermeasure to dry soil is the
Mhm,
stamping on it,
mhm.
uh, the trampling it, so that
Yeah, yeah,
it has more
right.
crevices and cracks to absorb.
Right, right. And then by incorporating the plant material through the trampling, then you get more carbon rich soil because you've got a lot of active soil life that's building carbon in the soil, which in turn is allowing for more water to be held in the soil. So, yeah, so, uh, in thinking about this whole holistic plan grazing scenario, I went to, so holistic management was developed by, many, the understanding many indigenous communities, but also Alan Savory
Yes.
from Zimbabwe is the fellow that kind of codified it and developed a whole system where um, of decision making among land managers. So he created holistic management in that way, and I spent a week with him in Zimbabwe, um, and on the demonstration site for holistic management, Dimbengombe, as the Africa Center for Holistic Management. And when I was there, and what I saw was extraordinary, and I continue to keep up with this community, but that right now, unfortunately, in Zimbabwe, I mean, there's been a horrible multi-year drought, but that landscape is still green. It's still holding on to its life. But what I came to understand, one way to explain this dynamic is, so, and again, this has to do with water, different kind of landscapes, brittle landscapes and non-brittle landscapes.
Hmm.
So we think that
Yeah.
like we know what a dry landscape is. Oh, it's where they don't get much rain, but or there are a brittle landscape is when there are distinct dry and rainy seasons. Like, you're in New York, I'm in Vermont, that's non-brittle. So, um, there's
You're
always,
talking about greater extremes
yeah, when
of
there's,
dry and wet.
right,
Got it?
right. So that kind of landscape, when there are seasonal rains and a high brittleness, um, nature had a challenge. And that was, how do you maintain moisture in the soil? How do you keep life going from the end of one rainy season to the beginning of the next? And the tool that nature came up with was through the activities and digestive processes of ruminant animals. So that's what
Oh,
livestock
yeah.
do.
Yeah. Now you have to ask yourself, thanks for completing that circle. Uh, when Mother Nature's intelligence crafted this crazy experiment and included us in the picture, um, there was a lot of intelligence that went into this creation, if you will. And so you cannot separate out animals from the ecosystem. Even if you're vegetarian, you still have to appreciate the role of cow poop, cow pies in the soil that grows the lettuce.
Mhm.
So you're helping to complete that circle of the natural, organic relationship between all the seemingly disparate parts of the larger unified whole.
Yeah, no, that's been something that's fascinated me is um, the importance of animal impact and how it isn't always what it seems to be.
Right, exactly. People want to extricate, it's a funny aspect of the human psyche. But
Mhm,
I want
mhm.
to ask you, and we have a few more minutes left, but tilling is a traditional farming technique. Yet it has been found that tilling the soil is actually very damaging to it. And could you comment on that and bring a little
Yeah.
understanding?
Yeah, okay. So this relates to kind of more understanding that we all now have about soil. One thing is compaction, is machinery and all that compacts soil ultimately. Although tilling, I guess it's loosening the soil, but
Yeah,
over time it does compact the soil. And also because I'd mentioned soil life.
yes,
And one component of soil life is mycelia, is all the fungi, the filaments
yep,
of fungi that
right.
are all the way through.
Filaments, the tentacles,
Yeah,
the bacteria, the microbes, all of our little friends that
right,
compose an enormous part of soil life.
right. And tilling breaks up those relationships. It
That's what I
it
thought you were going to
cuts,
say. Yeah, yeah.
it chops up the
Damages. Yeah,
yeah, all the fungi. And one of the things that the fungi do in the soil is they extend the reach
yeah,
for plants of moisture and nutrients. So
yeah.
cutting that off really,
Is like a
yeah,
death cycle. Yeah.
yeah,
No, good. You explained it. Thank you. And I I kind of knew it, but I wanted to hear it from somebody else who's sort of a specialist. So, no, that's very useful. And it's just kind of funny how oftentimes we pay homage to traditions, which I think is also very good on many levels. And yet, this seems to be one that has been not informed by wisdom, but by just blind adherence to
hmm,
certain practice.
right. It makes it easier to
Plants,
then you can do industrial monocultures and all of that. You
right?
have more control, I guess. It's more work but a lot of people do, um, you know, chemical free, um, no till.
Oh God, yeah, absolutely. Well, now it's a thing. Now that our understanding scientifically of what's happening and ecologically is so much greater that we can make another level of decision regarding soil.
Yeah,
So there is a distinction between tilling, which is in a sense ripping up, and stampeding down,
right, right.
you
So,
know,
and with an huge release of carbon, which oxidizes and becomes carbon dioxide,
right,
which depletes the soil. So
of
when
its
you're
carbon.
losing, yeah, so when you're losing the carbon, when the organic matter is kind of breaking down,
Yeah.
that's when you need chemicals to, compensate for the deterioration of the quality of,
So
and
they say, so
yeah,
they say. But there's this, of course, this intimate micro macro relationship we have with each other and with our whole species and with nature. And so what you're doing in the way you were describing it, and it's true with the mycelium, we're breaking up relationships, long term,
hmm,
far
hmm,
away relationships that
right,
are still intimate
right,
because
and
of
mutually beneficial.
that are so beneficial. And, one of the beautiful, amazing things that have emerged from soil science is that there is a communication system. It's almost like, you know, AT&T under the ground,
Hmm,
these plants through the mycelia are communicating with each other, and they are actually sharing the way our mothers and fathers taught us to do with each other. No, share and share alike.
yeah,
So too, the trees and the plants and the bushes are sharing with each other water, of all things, sometimes oxygen, sometimes nitrogen, And it's through these filaments that you described
Mhm.
that takes place. So there's a whole world. I remember interviewing the woman who made the film Symphony of the Soil. And
Oh,
that was
yes.
one of my first awakenings. She was actually Jerry Garcia's the Grateful Dead's one of
Mhm.
his ex-wives, and she used that money so wisely to help understand the larger soil picture, and of course the global crisis we're facing with an ecocide, essentially, and that there are all of these brilliant, beautiful solutions that we have in hand that you're helping to articulate, by the way, in your writing. So you're making a truly wonderful contribution to us all in what you're writing. Last words, we have to wrap up now, but last words you would like to share with our audience that you feel we should know. By the way, I have to say, I'm so glad you'll be joining us on Earth Day, a Better World's Earth Day celebration coming up. It'll be great. And by the way, with all due respect to the amazing work of Alan Savory, I am gifted to be working with a nutritionist and soil scientist who feels his work has gone far beyond the ordinary domain, he calls it, of regenerative farming. So you'll learn something about that on Earth Day because he's also one of our speakers. And I'm working with him. Better World is working with him to help bring that about in larger measure into our world. But please go on.
Yeah, I guess final words is just I've had the incredible gift of seeing landscapes transformed and biodiversity return, and I know it's possible, and I just wish more people knew that it was possible because, the environmental news is always, it seems always to be bad news,
Yeah,
but we have a lot more agency than we generally realize. And by working with nature, um, we can live in harmony with the earth and um, yeah, deal with these challenges.
exactly. Beautiful. Presidents don't rule, nature rules.
Yep.
Remember that.
Yeah.
Very important. There was a fellow, someone I actually had on Earth Day many years ago, professor emeritus at University of Arizona, Guy McPherson, a fierce
Mhm.
environmentalist. Loved this guy. And he had a radio show near mine some years back called Nature Bats Last.
Yeah.
And I always loved that.
Yeah. It's true.
That idea, right? If we haven't learned that through the hurricanes and the tornadoes and the droughts and the floods and everything else, it became biblical for a reason, I think. It's not by accident. Judy, thank you so much for your good work and for being a guest today.
Okay, my pleasure.
Really
Thank you.
great.
And I'll see you on Earth.
That's right. A nun, as we say.
Yes. Okay.
Wow, I hope you enjoyed that as I did. I'm feeling water as a verb moving through my body right now.
Ah.
So,
Great.
thanks so much for joining us, Mitchell Rabin for a Better World, and I look forward to seeing you all next week.